Hi, I'm Lizzie and I'm older than I look. This week was fascinating. Um, just today, I brought my cat Thomas to meet his new vet, and they actually had a cute sign in the entryway with the names of all the patients coming in that day and welcoming them in. So, if you needed something nice to start your week off, there you go. So, a couple days ago, I was rewatching a special by Fortune Feimster, who's a stand up comic I really like. And in that special, she talks about realizing that she's gay. And that's a process that I've been going through myself over the last however long. And I had to laugh because she goes through a long list of reasons why we everyone should have realized. Excuse me. Oh, here's my producer Thomas. Hello, Thomas. Hi. You went to the vet today. Yes, you did. So, she has this bit wherein she describes all the signs that should have shown her family that she was gay. And it got me thinking about my own childhood and all of the many signs along the way that was, and still am both into women and also non binary. Those things were pretty obvious, I think. Um, things like even in the very boy girl sexist 90s in which I was raised, I really insisted on wearing sweatpants, and I even wanted to wear boxer briefs because I thought they were just more comfortable than girls' underwear. Um, and I really didn't resonate with any of the girl toys that were presented to me. Like Barbies didn't really inspire me in any way. I didn't want to play with them. I couldn't really see the point. Um, I was way more into like Matchbox cars. That was a big thing for me. I was way into Matchbox cars. Um, but yeah, loved bugs, loved getting dirty. I hated being told to play house with the other girls. I thought that was just absolute bullshit nonsense. Um, and I thought girls were really pretty, but I didn't want to be them. I just admired them. And one notable time when I was young, I remember I was maybe first grade, maybe second grade. And my little friend group, we were all girls, or we all thought we were anyway, and they all wanted to just walk the perimeter of the playground during recess and talk about the other students. And I just like didn't really want to do that. I just didn't see that that was fun. What I wanted to do was run around and play on the playground equipment and just work off some energy. And so that day, I just peeled off from that group and I went and played on the equipment and let them do their laps. And that was kind of the last time I tried to fit in with the like super feminine crowd. I just kind of stopped trying after that. I realized recently, and I wish I had realized this before I spent 20 years dating straight men. I wish I had realized that I really love and appreciate men as colleagues and friends and family members, but I just don't want to be with them. And I think that's why sex for me just like never really felt like that big of a deal because I don't think it meant to me what it was supposed to mean when you are actually desiring the person you're with as opposed to oh well, like we've been making out for a while and oh he's getting hard so we should probably have sex now is probably the time. um that's not really a good enough reason to be with somebody intimately, I don't think. Do you? I don't know. See me in the comments, I suppose. Yeah, I was growing up in rural Vermont in the 90s. And in that area, the conservative mindset ruled, and it was assumed that everybody was straight, and it was encouraged in every possible facet of life. Some things like at our pep rallies at high school, the the girls dance team was always expected to perform like a pretty like seductive looking dance for teenagers to be performing anyway, or maybe that's just because I was gay and didn't realize. But the girls would perform a dance for all of the boys football team, but I didn't see any group of boys performing a dance for the girls team, and I definitely didn't see anything having to do with same-sex attraction being celebrated in such a public way. And I never really considered realistically the possibility of dating a woman until recently, because I just wasn't in an environment and I wasn't surrounded by people who could support that. But I've done a lot of work to reconfigure my whole life, and that's taken years. But I pulled myself out of the environments where I was forced to be something that I'm not, and I put myself in a place where I get to just exist how I am. And moreover, I get to create an environment at my cafe where I manage. I get to create an environment where other people can also just exist the way they are, and that's just fine. And that feels really good. But that is all to say that we're not in 1990s country town USA anymore. We are, or I am living in a really lovely, diverse city now, and people don't really care what I'm up to because there are just a lot of people here. It's not the same sort of small town experience where if I do something, I'm gonna get a lot of direct feedback as I walk down the street. It's just such a different situation. I have so much more freedom to just exist the way I am. So I think it took a long time for my mind to really accept that I found and created safety. But now that it's sinking in, it's also starting to become more and more obvious to me that the reason that I've never found a man I wanted to marry is because I don't want to marry a man. And that math sounds so simple saying it out loud, but it took 38 years to figure it out. So, things always seem simpler after we find the solution, I suppose. Patterns I observed while I was unsuccessfully dating straight men. And that's not to say that the relationships didn't go well, but they went well because I was playing the role of straight girl as opposed to really expressing who I was. And it's amazing how well you can get along with someone when you're just not being yourself. So some things I saw that I won't generalize are things that all men do, but all the men that I dated did them. I noticed a really intense level of attention at the beginning of the relationship that is simply just not sustainable long term, but it's really easy to get used to, especially for somebody like me who has a really addictive mind and nervous system. Um, so getting hooked on that level of attention and care, um, only to see it taper off into something kind of less satisfying. You start with regular Coke, and you end up with caffeine-free Diet Coke by the end. You're just like, what am I even getting out of this? And if it always felt to me like it was a bait and switch. And I'm curious to hear if anybody agrees or feels really differently about that. But it always felt to me like I was getting lured in with this love and attention, and then gradually it would shift, and I would be getting less attention, but he would be asking for more, and it sort of felt like I was being groomed to be a caretaker, and I was just expected to just live on those first couple months of attention for the rest of my life. Which sort of calls to mind how it seems like a lot of straight women are expected to just live on the joy of the wedding day for the rest of their lives and then just do a bunch of unpaid labor after the fact, just fueled by memories. Seems like a bad deal to me. Another thing I noticed is that um, I think because I wasn't really doing any of those relationships out of actual physical and emotional desire for the person, but because I wanted to complete the steps, I noticed that I always had to wait for whatever guy I was with to be ready before we could move on to whatever the next step of the relationship would be. Whether that is, making it official and deciding that you're only going to date each other, to meeting the parents, moving in together, getting engaged. Um, I never wanted to have kids, but that would be kind of the next logical step in the straight guy girl relationship saga. And what I noticed is that anytime I felt ready to move on to that next step, I found myself in a weird purgatory where I was just waiting for him to be ready and just wondering why he wasn't there yet and what I needed to do to be worthy of the next step. What more could I do? And it was a strange journey to go on where it starts with someone lavishing you with compliments and attention, and then it shifts to me, scratching my arms like an addict. Hard to understand. But one exception to that pattern that I did see is one guy I dated when I was in grad school, so I was in my early 20s. I he told me that we were going to get married and told me that we were going to have 4 children. I didn't want to have any children. So, but he couldn't even process that I would have any other different ideas than what he was telling me was going to happen, which scared me a lot. And so, once I got up the courage, which really happened once he moved out of town, and I was to follow after he had secured us a home, real manifest destiny style. So he was in a different city at that point, and that was when I called him on the phone and ended things because I knew that was the safest time to do it. And that didn't go very well. He really used all of his powers of persuasion, which were a lot because he went to a really prestigious law school. So he used all of his law school powers on me, but they didn't work, and I held firm. And we hung up. I took a beat to just collect myself and breathe and come back to center, and then I decided to call my mom because she and I were still in contact at this point and had a really codependent relationship, so I told her everything as soon as it happened. So, took a beat, called her up, and she already knew what had happened because this guy had called her the instant he and I had hung up, and he thought that he could just tell my mother to tell me what to do, even though I was a grown adult person living in a different state than her. He assumed that because she was my mother, she would just be able to boss me around and tell me what to do and force me to get back together with him. And to her credit, she did not do any of those things, and she told him that he could probably just respect the decision I had made. Oh, so what makes a good relationship in the first place? Because I don't think that relationship was very good. I think the best relationships are when two people come together who already feel like complete people. I am so wary of anybody who comes to me claiming they're incomplete, claiming that they can't self-soothe, they can't manage themselves. That it's all of those feel like red flags to me, because those are all things that I had to figure out how to do for myself. And not just as a child when I should have had an adult helping me, but also as an adult, I had to actually learn how to do all those things in a healthy way. And that took about 10 years in therapy, because I had a hell of a childhood. But the point is that I did it. So I know that it's possible to learn how to do those things. And now that's a standard I have for anybody that I'm going to let into my life. They just have to be a whole person. I can't take any of these broken creatures under my wing anymore. I just don't have the energy for it. Beyond that, neither person is above the other, I think, in a really good relationship. And that was something that worried me about the last guy I dated, is that he kept telling me, you have all the power. And this was weird for a number of reasons, mostly because he would just say it out of nowhere, but I didn't want to have all the power. And moreover, usually when people say stuff like that, it's because they're trying to convince you that you do, even when you really don't. So I just really didn't like hearing that at all. And I didn't like any of the implications, because I don't want to have all the power, because that means I have to manage another adult. And if they're an adult, they should really be able to manage themselves. Another thing that I learned from this past relationship was that a compatible communication style is key. In my case, this means I need to be with somebody who doesn't rely on sarcasm. Sarcasm is something that I understand, recognize, appreciate, but it's also not my native language. Because of the way my brain is wired, I just prefer more direct, literal communication. I don't like having to sift through. I don't like having to wonder whether to take somebody seriously, because I have struggled so often in my life to be taken seriously and been laughed off, and I know how unpleasant that feels. And so I'm really hesitant to do that to somebody else. So I'd prefer that people just, when they're being serious about something, just be clear and communicative about it. And this guy that I dated most recently, he was a real sarcasm enthusiast, which is fine, but it just wasn't something I wanted to be around all the time. And I think that's an important thing, is that, it doesn't really matter how attractive somebody is. If you find yourself really on edge after being around them, that's more important by a mile. And having the same activity level is really important as well. I struggle with some dynamic disabilities. They come and go throughout the month, and that means that sometimes I can do the active thing, but sometimes I just can't. And no amount of encouragement or helpful advice is going to change the amount of energy that exists in my body. And being with somebody who can either match your need for activity or be all right with your need for rest is really important, because it's really easy to, as a disabled person, get caught up in a relationship where somebody is constantly just trying to improve you out of your disability, or resents you for the days of rest that you need that maybe they don't need and maybe are boring to them. And that's just not a relationship that anybody needs to be in on either end. The active person should get to run around and be active, and the person like me should get all of the couch time that they need to maintain their body. I've noticed a difference in breakups between my 20s and my 30s. And the differences are mostly that breakups in my 30s have been calmer and more focused on long-term stuff. Because what I've found is that dating when I am making a decent salary means that I'm not really looking for somebody to move in with and combine lives with so that I can keep my head above water financially. That, I think, was a bit of a goal in my 20s. I thought, hey, these people who are married, they get to live together, they get to pay one rent instead of two, they get all of these supposed tax benefits, and it just seemed like a really good deal. And so I was just like, man, I just feel like life would be a little easier if I could just join forces with somebody in that way. So I had a real old school version of marriage in my head where we were just joining finances. But what I notice now is that I had a habit of just bouncing from one relationship to the next without taking a lot of space in between, because I really, really just wanted to get to that point of joining forces with someone. And I didn't see any other way to do that but to just keep on getting out there. And I kept working hard along the way, and eventually I got myself into a position where I'm earning a good living, and I don't have any children, so I don't make a ton of money, but like for a single person, I'm pretty comfortable, and that has taken the edge off of the desperation by an exponential measure, because now it's not enough if a guy has money. He has to actually be a tolerable human being, and it's just easier to parse those things apart and be more demanding when I'm in a place of financial security. And I don't think that's a new fight that anyone is learning about just now, but it is kind of shocking to see how much financial security has made me a picky person who maybe doesn't want to date anybody at all. But another difference I've noticed with dating while earning a really good living for myself is that the role of woman really wasn't being filled by anybody in my relationships, because I am a hard worker, full-time earner, and I just didn't really have the energy left over to nurture another man into career success the way straight women are raised to perform, at least where I come from. I was raised, I heard the phrase be a helpmeet a lot when I was growing up. I was raised to believe that because I was born in a female body, I would eventually grow up and just be in charge of making life amazing for a man. And if I made his life amazing enough, he would be able to earn a good living and would turn around and support me. And I heard a lot about that help me type role. And eventually I started thinking, well, the husband sort of feels like a middleman, and maybe I can just go out and earn my own money and then I don't have to do what anybody else wants. Another thing I've noticed about breakups in my 30s is that they feel largely the same as choosing to leave a job that's not the right fit. Um, it's become easier to see now that, much like a workplace can be great but not great for me, another person can be a great person but just not a great match for me. And that doesn't have to mean that anybody is bad. It just means that the fit is not correct. And that's really nice to learn. Really takes the edge off. So this is all to say that I have been working harder to embrace my newly discovered lesbian identity, I guess we'll say. And I'm someone who thrives on visual reminders. So I got this little bracelet that is the lesbian pride flag. I think if you couldn't tell from the extremely practical wristwatch, you probably would be able to tell from the pride flag. Um, and I've been listening to a lot more musical artists and stand-up comics who identify as queer or specifically lesbian. And in general, I'm just trying to gain a better awareness of something that I didn't even understand I had any claim to. I didn't know that this was something I belonged to. And now I'm really interested in seeing what happens when I start making up for lost time. Thanks for checking out Older Than I Look, created and produced by me, Lizzy Co. Theme song is Controversy by 40 Watt Hype. You can find more at thelizzycoshow.com. It's been great chatting with you. I'll see you here next Thursday for a whole new episode. See you next time.